Hello, Pedro. This is Mark. Um, I just thought I'd make a video for you, just as a further attempt in communication, because I'm not really sure if what I've been saying makes any sense to you or not. And I haven't done this before, uh, so this is just another ongoing experiment for me in communicating. And I want to say that I really appreciate the kind of patience and interest that you've had in this topic, like I do. For me, it's uh, it's a really valuable opportunity to have a smart person like you to talk to about it, because that helps me formulate what I think and have to deal with intelligent objections and try to convey how I'm seeing things, which is not easy to do for you or for me, for anybody. So I feel like it's just really good practice if we meet somebody who's willing to kind of take a look at things with us. So um, and I thought this, well, two things. This question, who or what is you, or as it's normally phrased, like within kind of spiritual path circles, who or what am I? This existential question, but also a kind of a spiritual inquiry. This sort of question. This has a history and context within certainly Buddhism and Advaita Vedanta, um, but it has a different context, obviously, within cognitive science, and so I'm trying to see how these two different ways of approaching this, one I would say from the subjective side, and the other from the objective side, how they might fit or not fit. That's kind of an interest for me. Um, and you'd said at one point that this other commenter, Martina, pointed out um, the the um, the physical is the reality of the mental. And I thought that was an interesting statement, because I would say the exact opposite. I would say that the mental is the reality of the physical. Um, I wouldn't make that an ultimate statement, but I would use that as a statement to begin to get at what we mean by um, uh, well, real. But I would actually wait to use that word too. But anyway, I wanted to try to tell you what I mean and see what you think, because I think we actually have agreement in some ways on this question. Um, you know, um, Neuroscientists, also Dennett, um, any materialist philosopher these days, they no longer have a like a completely naive, childlike understanding of what this is. They don't. No one says that uh, they don't have the view that the eyes are the window to the soul, and if whatever I look out at here, it's as if it's as if my eyes are these glasses and they're these windows, and somehow these, everything here, these objects are make impressions on my soul inside, and so that there's these real things that impress upon my soul, and therefore I see them, and they're real, and I'm real as a soul. Nobody thinks that, you know. Nobody thinks about it that way. Um, it's not like I'm looking through glass, but that's a naive view. That's what kids think, and that's what people used to think, because it seems that way. It seems like if you look around, it seems like I'm in here, and it seems like all this stuff is out here, and there's a kind of a somehow a barrier between the two, which is like my eyes, that separates the two, and that's outside and that's inside. I mean, it's like a certainly a first level approximation, kind of good idea of what it is. There's something inside, okay, it's a soul. Something outside, it's matter. And I've got these different windows, I've got the ear window, the eye window, the sense faculties, Sure, makes sense. But that's naive, because we found out that actually none of this stuff. And now I'm going to speak like just purely scientific materialism. Purely, the mind is an epiphenomenon of the brain. This stuff, it's not real as it appears. All this stuff is simply a simulation, as Anil Seth does a kind of wonderful job of pointing out in his TED talk, and that's they all the neuroscientists believe this. It's a simulation. It's a simulation within the mind of a true or real reality that they would say is physical, but I'm going to get to that in a second. But they say that this is a real thing, but it's a simulation. Something is real. I mean, I'll get to that. But they literally are saying that we are experiencing our mind. This is mental. This is a simulation in the mind. So somehow, for some reason, that doesn't seem to penetrate people as deeply as I would think it could, because and I think the reason is because the philosopher's stone, the hard thing behind what we see, the real thing. Scientists or material scientists, that their kind of intuition or their feeling, it's a feeling about it. It's like this. It's like we've got the glass, we've got this simulation, but behind the simulation is another thing that's real, that's something like it. Like these glasses behind glasses. We may not see these glasses, the real thing, but we see something very much like it, like that. That's kind of I would say, the naive view of this way of seeing things. Okay, because we know, with a little bit of consideration, we know that it doesn't look like that. Like reality can't look like that, because different types of beings experience different things. To me, it may look like this. To some other being, it may look like this or seem like this. To another being, say, I don't know what, like a mosquito, octopus, or whatever, like this. All these different beings have a different simulation, so whatever reality is, we can't characterize it via its properties, because the properties we experience are simply mental. They're our simulation properties. So so at that level, the mental is then the reality of the physical, meaning the physical is actually mental. It's actually simulation. What physics, what my understanding of what physics is doing, physics is actually exploring the mental. They're taking it seriously. They're really exploring the model, the epiphenomenal model. Again, in this kind of way of thinking about it, the human model of the brain. That's what physics is documenting, and is what it's using equations and theories to make a universal model, so that the different mental models of different beings, different humans, and then, although this begins to fall apart here, also other beings, those models will sync. Those models will you'll get the same. You can agree. Basically, you can agree on what's happening if you follow this universal model. I'm getting a little hazy right now. I've got to think through that a lot more, actually, to really be able to talk about it with any clarity. But I could say that the physicists are studying we call the objective pole of experience. That is mind. They're studying mind, but it's the objective side. The objective meaning objects, what appear to be objects. They're not objects. Again, we've known that for a very long time. These things are not fundamentally you know, this is just a perception for a human. This is mainly empty space. You could break it down to subatomic particles, and then below that, it's actually, we could talk about it in terms of energy. Energy essentially is, their descriptions of its movements. Really, if just the equations, they have to do with apparent movement within space. And then, really, if you go really, really deeper, at a quantum level, in the end, you cannot really characterize what this thing is. Again, that's another story, a little deeper story that I don't want to kind of go into yet. But my point is that it's the objective pole of experience, and the other way of studying the mind, which is not, consigned to the woo-woo file for most scientific materialists, is to study the subjective pole. Now, because that's kind of how it's presented to us. So we have a kind of a perceiver and perceived, a kind of a subjective pole and an objective pole. And in what I wrote to you, one thing I want to point out here about this subjective pole is that to find it is more subtle than we think. It's more difficult than we think, typically, than cognitive scientists who tend to work on the problem than they think. Because the subjective pole keeps you could say, it keeps retreating inward. And what I mean by that is, clearly, if I look at a pen, here's the pen and here's the perceiver back here looking at the pen. If I start to turn around then to look inward, not at the pen, but what's looking at the pen, I may see a thought about the pen. I may have some inner experience, but as soon as I have any kind of inner experience, that again becomes just like the pen. That becomes the objective pole of what's seen. This is an important move to be able to see. Whatever I perceive, if I turn my awareness, my attention inward towards what appears to be, what seems to me to be the source of that looking, I cannot see anything. And whatever I come up with as the source is yet another object. It's just another object that I now have seen, that I need again to look back again to see what's seeing it. So what happens actually, and this is really interesting, what actually happens, this is what I see in this story, and this kind of really amazing thing that's going on right now, in our world right now, is, first of all, everything is mind. I just tried to explain what I mean by that when I say everything is mind. I'm not sure if you agree, and it's okay if you don't, and I'd be interested to see what you have to say about it. But when we, as scientifically minded people, or when physicists really do this, when they begin to penetrate what this is out here as mind, the physical pole, eventually they come to a hard stop in whether it is characterizable or not. They find that, and this is the Heisenberg uncertainty principle, and it's deeper than that as well. It's deeper in that a fuller description of it would include other things besides that. But you cannot say that it is one thing or another. You cannot actually characterize its properties. In the same way, if you look inward, eventually, in the same way that it took us a long time to get there with physics. it took mystics, a long time to get there with with meditation. You find if you keep going this way, you find uh, you find that you cannot characterize it. So you actually kind of find the same thing whether you go in the objective pole or whether you go in the subjective pole. Which doesn't mean that there is nothing there, because obviously we're having experience. So then that's what really becomes interesting, is what is that? You know, you could say, what is the philosopher's stone? If you want to think about it in terms of the objective pole. Or you could say, who or what am I? If you want to talk about it in terms of the subjective pole. And in the end, according to the meditative traditions, it turns out that the answer is the same. But it's not an answer that you can articulate in words. And the other thing about it is, what I've said is actually, it's not really radical at all about the mental nature of the physical that we are experiencing here. But somebody can find that out. Somebody can, like, call them the cognitive scientists. They already know this. They everybody knows this. But it doesn't necessarily have an effect on your behavior whatsoever. You just forget, because the world seems so real, seems so physical, it seems so like matter, not like mental, that it doesn't affect, it really doesn't, you don't really, you can know it kind of in an intellectual way, but it doesn't stick, you don't grok it actually. It's just it's like, oh yeah, I know that, yeah. Not really, because it doesn't, because if you think about it, if you really knew that it was simply a simulation, if you really knew, then your experience would be more like if you wake up in a dream and you really know that it's just a dream, that it's not actually real. Your experience would begin to more take on some of those qualities in terms of your fearlessness, in terms of the entire feeling of the whole experience. So, this is one reason why the mystical or spiritual path doesn't go out, although it can analyze everything, but that path or that methodology, phenomenology, goes this way, goes inward, because that's in the direction of discovering not what reality is as an object, but what reality is as subject, which is to say, what I actually am. If I discover what I actually am, maybe you could admit that I don't mean discover it like a theory. I mean, I see it, I know it, I'm clear about it. That's a very different thing and the effects on oneself are going to be very different, because it's a very personal knowledge. It's going to be very different than if you simply come up with some facts about, a world that continues to appear to you as a real physical world. So you come up with some facts that make it look a little bit interesting sometime, and you forget about it and just go back to your movie or whatever you do. So that's why in that a comment I made, that's why some people spend their lives meditating in a cave, because they're interested in the same thing. It's the objective pole, subjective pole of the same reality. But according to the various traditions, if you actually want to grok, really get it, what's going on here, in a way that you have direct knowledge of it, and not secondhand or simply ideas, then the way to go is this way, not that way. So I hope that was maybe clear. I really don't know. I mean, I spent most of my time around, a lot of time around people that are interested in going this way, not studying this way. So I'm not sure, really how this comes across to somebody. And I don't know anything. And maybe you spent years in meditation too, and this totally makes sense to you, and you could very well understand it better than I do. I really don't know. But so far your responses have led me to believe that you're kind of more focused on the objective pole, which is also cool. I mean, honestly, I think that they lead the same way. And if you go far enough in this direction, eventually this is maybe Hofstadter's strange loop. Eventually, you will get here. I believe that a lot of the great physicists did, but they have to be, well, I don't know. I don't know why some people get to that and some don't. I really don't. Anyway, that was a lot. Hopefully, maybe that was interesting to you. And again, really, I've enjoyed our discussion, even though we've not even met yet. It's been fun, and I wish you the best in your beautiful city. Take care. Bye-bye.